This is Lesson 4. In this chapter, you explore working with a number of different advanced drawing tools in Flash CS5. One tool we're going to take a quick look at is the Spray Brush tool. This tool was introduced in Flash CS4 and opens up an unlimited number of creative possibilities and some practical ones as well. Let's take a look and get started by opening up the fl04_video.fla lesson file. This is a variation of the file you use in the written lessons, and what we're going to do is take a look at the spray brush and some of the creative possibilities that we can unleash with it. First, let's go ahead and activate the spray brush tool. To do this, we go over to our tools panel on the right, and we're going to select the brush tool and click and hold down the mouse button. The spray brush tool is actually hidden beneath the brush tool. Let's go ahead and select that. Now, what makes the spray brush tool a little bit different than working with the standard brush tool is that as opposed to working with a solid color or a gradient, we actually use symbols from our library to paint with the spray brush tool. We have quite a few symbols in the library, so what we're going to do first, before we can even start using the tool, is choose a symbol that we'd like to use so the spray brush knows what to paint onto the stage. On the property inspector with the spray brush tool active, locate the symbol area. Here, you'll notice there's a place to choose the symbol. And it shows you right now that it's going to be spraying no symbol because we haven't selected one. So the first order of business is to click the Edit button immediately to the right. This opens up the Select Symbol dialog box, and from here we can see all of the symbols in our library and choose one that's going to be the active shape that we paint with using the spray brush tool. At the bottom of the list, you should have a graphic symbol called star. Go ahead and select that. The Select Symbol dialog box gives you a preview on the left, so we know we're working with the right symbol. And let's go ahead and click OK to move forward. Now that we've set the shape, or rather the symbol that we're going to be painting with, let's go ahead and experiment with this a little bit before fine-tuning any options. With your spray brush tool active, move over the stage, click and drag. And move around, you'll see that this actually paints with the symbol that you chose. Go ahead and release. Now for a moment what we're going to do is let's go ahead and switch to our selection tool. Easiest way to do this is to press the V key. Now, if you click anywhere on the area that you painted, you'll see that actually the spray brush tool creates what looks like a symbol. Every time we use the spray brush tool, all of the ink or all of the shapes we painted in one stroke appear grouped. And we can see here by the blue bounding box, that's exactly what's happening. Now, let's go ahead with this selected and let's hit the delete key or backspace. And let's get rid of everything we just painted on the stage and start over again. Once again, return over to the tools panel and click and select the spray brush tool, and the star shape that you selected should still be active. Now, the first thing you may want to do is you notice that the symbol that we're using is probably larger than we may want, and it actually covers the stage quite quickly in just a few strokes. So what we may want to do first is scale down the shape, and we can do that right underneath the symbol options by choosing Scale Width and Scale Height right over on the Property Inspector. So let's go ahead and click and drag over where it reads 100%, and let's drag to the left. And let's reduce the scale width to 30%. Do the same for the scale height. Note, if you have trouble getting that exact number, what you can also do is double click on that value and type in the number that you want. So we should have the scale width and scale height now set to 30%. Once again, move your spray brush tool over the stage, click and drag, and you'll see this paints much smaller stars this time. So it's a little bit more manageable. Now you'll notice right below the symbol options, we also have a few checkboxes, and these allow us to control the behavior of how those symbols are sprayed onto the stage. So we'll see here that we have three checkboxes: random scaling, rotate symbol, and random rotation. And here we have rotate symbol checked off. It randomly rotates each symbol as it's sprayed onto the stage to give a slight variation. It's pretty subtle here because of the size of the star we're using right now, but if we want, we can also make the size or scaling more erratic by checking off the random scaling checkbox. Once we do that, let's once again return to the stage, click and drag, and we'll see what it does is it actually reduces or increases the scaling of the symbol. So this gives us more of a random or scattered look. Now what you'll notice in this case is it never goes above the scale width and scale height, which right now is set to 30%. If we want a little more variation or allow it to go larger, we can actually increase the scale width and scale height, which is what we're going to do right now. Go back up to scale width and scale height, click on the values, and set each one to 50, as in 50%. Go ahead and return back to the stage and spray again, and you'll see we get a little more variety now, ranging from very tiny to much larger than what we had before. Now you'll notice there's also a random rotation checkbox. So what we said before about the rotate symbol checkbox is true to a degree. It does rotate the symbol, but it's not completely random. It does follow some type of a pattern or an angle. In this case, if we want to provide an even more erratic look to what we're painting onto the stage, we can go ahead and check that. And if we click again and paint, again, it's a little bit subtle, but you'll notice that it actually randomly rotates each instance of the symbol as it paints it onto the stage. So the trick is really to play with these different options and configurations, because depending on the shape of your symbol, in this case we're using a symbol that's fairly symmetrical, but if you're using something that's not as symmetrical, it may be a little bit more obvious when you work with some of these different options. Now once again, press your V key to return to your selection tool temporarily. What we're going to do is clear the stage out. And if you click anywhere on the stage where we've painted, you'll see that each stroke or each sequence of paint that we put down, or each stroke of the spray brush, leaves a group behind. So if you click around, you get these different bounding boxes showing the groups that you chose, and you can go ahead and just delete those. It may take a couple of shots here since we painted a few times until your stage is clear. Now, once again, you can return back to the spray brush tool. A nice shortcut key for this, by the way, is the B key. The B key actually toggles also between the spray brush tool and the standard brush tool. But in this case, one stroke of the B key brings us back to the last brush tool we used, which is the spray brush tool. Now, the spray brush tool is a brush after all, so we do have some basic options as we see here at the bottom, which is the width and height. So that's the actual size that we're painting onto the stage. So if we see that we're filling up the stage a little bit too quickly, it may be that our brush size is a little bit too large. Here it's set to 114 pixels. It may be slightly different for you. It tends to store the last value that you set. So what we're going to do is to make these values consistent and also to make them a little bit smaller so that we're not painting as much in one shot. We're going to go ahead and set the width to 40, and we're also going to set the height to 40. That's in pixels, by the way. And if we click and drag on the stage again, we'll see the paint area is much smaller and much more condensed this time. So it gives us a little bit more control. Now the brush angle, which you see below the width and the height, is one more option we can set for the brush itself. Now again, the results are going to vary quite a bit depending on the type of symbol you're painting with. Depending on the orientation of your symbol, the shape, and the symmetry, brush angle may or may not make such a big difference, but let's go ahead and give it a try here and see what happens. Let's go ahead and set a brush angle of 45 degrees clockwise. And if we click and drag, we'll see, yeah, it's very subtle. It doesn't really do a lot in this particular case. If we worked with a slightly different symbol, maybe a different story. Let's go ahead and play with the scale width and scale height and see if that makes any difference. Let's go back up to the symbol options, and under scale width, let's go ahead and actually set that to 30%. Let's set the scale height to 100%. This makes our brush somewhat oblong. If we go ahead and click and drag back, now it's very much more obvious what our brush angle can do here. So now we're actually using a brush that's taller than it is wider. So we get to see how the brush angle affects the outcome here. And again, this is only necessary in this particular case because we're using a symbol that's fairly symmetrical. But if you're using a symbol that tends to be wider than it is taller or vice versa, then this would be a lot more obvious. So again, we can see the spray brush tool gives us a lot of cool creative possibilities. It allows you to essentially create your own brush patterns to paint with, and it's a nice alternative to just filling areas with a texture or a bitmap or using the standard brush tool.